Welcome back. Well, at least 89 shopping centres, 45 warehouses and about over 120 pharmacies were among the properties looting during the unrest in KwaZulu-Natal in July. In a matter of days, South Africa's food supply chain was severely disrupted, not to mention the multi-billion rand cost in damages. And while the event may have been an exaggerated example of riots, it proved just how devastating protests can be for the economy. So in a country where protest has been the go-to voice to talk about service delivery concerns, let's come to costs with Professor Bonke Dumisa. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. As a result of the uncertainty caused by the recent unrest, some would call it an attempted insurrection, the rand depreciated by 2.4%. Have we witnessed similar economic downturns during mass service delivery shutdowns and protests like Fees Must Fall, for example?
Yes, we have witnessed these things many times, but of course in July it just went to the extremes. And what South Africans do not realize is this right they exercise in protesting is based on Section 17 of our Constitution, which clearly states that everyone has a right peacefully and unarmed to assemble and demonstrate, etc. But with all these public protests that have cost South Africa a lot of money, we find that people were not doing those things peacefully, and they were actually armed in that when they burn tires, that is being armed, etc. And it is costing the economy a lot. I mean, as it is now, if you ask many businesses and business formations in Durban, they are still counting the cost of what happened during those 5 days in July 2021. The cost is in billions of rands. And who is suffering? It is the poor, the very same people who were used and were in the forefront of these things.
We showed a protest in Soweto earlier, and there were bins overturned and rubbish all over the roads and roads being blocked. And it's those very residents who probably won't get services today because of the protest. But at the same time, when you're out there and you speak to people, you realize that they simply have nothing to lose because there is just absolutely nobody listening to them. What interests me is the destruction of civic property, such as libraries, schools, that we saw in the recent protests in KZN. Do those get rebuilt?
Yes, they do get rebuilt, but it takes some time before they are rebuilt. And there's also the hypothesis and theory that some of the people who get involved in banning schools and libraries and clinics are people who are already waiting to be given the tenders to rebuild those things. So these protests are not always genuine. There's a lot of corruption behind them. And that's why people have got to look at them with very jaundiced eyes. In the same way as you remember when people who do not want to pay for electricity in Soweto, they besieged the house of President Ramaphosa's sister. That was in clear violation of Section 10 of our Constitution, which says there must be respect for human dignity, and we must not really invade other people's privacy. So when people look at these things, we must not look at them simplistically from people who simply say, well, they never listen to us until sishai toi toi, until we protest and ban things.
That's an excellent point you make. The sort of diverse reasons for protests, it's not always, they're not always as they seem. Prof, how quickly does the economy bounce back when there is violent protest action and it breaks out across the country?
The problem is, yes, the economy can bounce back in terms of moving forward, but there's always the opportunity cost that if those things had not happened, the economy would be billions of rands better. As it is now, the 22 50 billion rands worth of damage to the South African economy in July. Yes, we have now normalized things, but that money will never be back. And the people who lost their jobs because of that, many of them are still at home because those jobs could not be sustained. So people must really not encourage this thing of people going to extremes because they see the government does not listen. Because in many instances, I'm not saying in most instances, but in many instances, people engage in this for their own nefarious reasons.
Thank you so much there for that insight. That's Professor Bonke Dumisa on the effect on the economy of protest action.